Chapter 8 of The Adventures of Tommy Blake by Brother Ernest Ryan. This Librivox Recording is in the public domain. Adrift. The night, tired out by her own fury, sleeps quietly at last. The insects, again dry of wing, are busy tuning up for their nocturnal symphony. The silver curtains of cloud part, and the powerful spotlight of the moon casts its silver rays down upon the sleeping hero of this drama. But he is totally unconscious of all that is going on. Others are at work on the plot in which he is an actor, but he is too tired to be interested. And so the night passes. When Tommy awoke it was almost 10 o'clock. So tired was he still, even after his deep slumbers, that he had no desire to get up from his comfortable bed of pine needles. He enjoyed the sense of freedom and security. No one would find him here, and as long as he stayed comfortably hidden, no sheriff would find him unless he had bloodhounds to help. To venture out into the open, on the other hand, would be dangerous, for he had not the least idea how close he might be to one of the many luxurious cottages around the lake area. Very close to him, but eyeing him suspiciously, a mother groundhog was feeding her young. It was the first time Tommy had seen a wild animal thus engaged in her domestic duties. It fascinated him. He did not want to move for fear of frightening her away. The sight of the animals took away from him, for the time being, that sense of loneliness which he had felt since Crawford left him for his trip to New York. If only Crawford were here now, his fertile mind would devise some way out of the present situation. Crawford always seemed to know just what to do. Tommy often wondered where his pal had learned so much. Another phase of Tommy's problem soon declared itself. There was a void in his stomach which was making itself felt very keenly. Hitherto he had given no thought to food, but now it forced itself on his attention. Where was he to get anything to eat here in the woods? To go to one of the summer homes would be dangerous. That had led to his and Crawford's being caught the first time they tried to escape. No, he must keep as far as possible from the houses. He did not want to be taken back to the school jail a second time, for it would mean not only disappointment but solitary confinement. That was the greatest punishment Kensington ever allowed. No boy was ever punished physically. Finally Tommy decided to crawl out from his hiding place and see what the country looked like. This he did very cautiously, gradually raising himself to his feet. He listened attentively for any token of another human being near, but no sounds reached his ears except those of the birds and insects. There was not a house in sight. In all directions spread only the fields and the woods. He hoped he was far away from the villa, but he had no means of knowing. Everything around was completely strange to him. For about an hour Tommy tramped on in what he believed to be the direction of Cliffville. Suddenly in the distance arose the gable of a house, the rest of the building being hidden among the trees. Was it perhaps the one near which he had been caught by the sheriff before? At once Tommy turned to the right, widening his distance from the house for the sake of safety. He increased his speed also, so if anyone had noticed him he would have a difficult time to catch up with him. Tommy now observed that the trees were not nearly so dense as they had been an hour before, and soon the woods ended altogether. He paused a moment to look around. There was still neither person nor house to be seen, but there was something that attracted his attention. Not 100 yards from where he stood he saw an orchard. Perhaps he could find something to eat there. It was now nearly noon, and he had taken no food since about 6 o'clock the night before. Why had he not been a little more thoughtful before he left the villa? He could have gone down to the kitchen and taken something to eat along with him. Perhaps old Bill would have packed him a lunch. Bill was that way. He knew that the boys who were to spend the summer at the villa would much rather be somewhere else. He also sympathized with them, though for the sake of his job he kept his ideas to himself. Nearing the orchard his speed increased. Already he could see the apples shining in the sun. At last here was something to eat. He reached up, picked one of the largest he could see, and quickly bit into it. But it was hard and sour. It was too early for apples. Tommy sat down upon some rocks to try to conquer his disappointment and to figure out what his next move should be. The stones were so delightfully warm beneath him that he decided to pull off his shirt and take a sunbath. The hot rays felt good upon his back. Then he spread out his arms somewhat toward the rear so as to brace his body while he leaned back, to let the sun strike straight on his chest. Spreading his hands thus, he felt something cool and quick moving beneath the fingers of his right hand. He automatically jerked it away, but not before the snake had bitten him in the web-like piece of flesh between the thumb and index finger. Alarmed, Tommy jumped to his feet. What should he do? At once his first aid lessons came to his mind. He looked carefully over the area where he expected to find the fang marks, squeezing the flesh so as to make the blood come through. After a brief moment he found the spot, a tiny red puncture filled with blood. He put it to his mouth to suck out the poison. The next thing that came to Tommy's mind was to try to locate the reptile to learn whether or not it belonged to a dangerous species. But there was no snake to be found, and soon Tommy was telling himself that after all he did not know one snake from another. Once again, after the first fright of the accident wore off, Tommy began to feel the gnawing in his stomach. He must soon find something to eat or take the other alternative, go to one of the cottages and run the chance of being caught and return to the villa. He made up his mind that he would continue his search for the village at which the train had stopped when he first came to the villa. Strange that he could not find the road he and Crawford had taken the night they were caught. He remembered that Crawford had told him that there was but one road to the town, but where was it? If he could only get to the town, he felt sure he'd be able to get something to eat. Someone would help him. People would surely not refuse to give a bite to eat to a harmless boy. More than once he had seen his mother distribute dainties to children of the neighborhood. Mothers were that way, he knew. On he went, until he saw another lake in the distance. Could it be that he was walking around in a large circle and coming out at the same place where he had passed the night? That indeed would be a tragedy. He did not know in what direction from the villa the town lay, so he could not use the sun for a guide. Once again his mind drifted away to Crawford, the pal who always knew the way out. But it was useless to think of Crawford now. Hundreds of miles of land and water separated them. And now a strange dizziness began to come over him. He could not remember ever having felt that way before. But dizziness or no dizziness, he could not stop his search now. He must get a glimpse of a house. If he could only find the one he had seen last night, he might be able to get his bearings. Gradually Tommy began to feel sick to his stomach. Why should that be, he wondered feebly, since his stomach had nothing in it? And these hot and cold spells. He tried to make himself believe they were due to the lack of food. But why that strange blur before his eyes? Of a sudden his foot caught in the root of a tree. He tried very hard to keep from falling, but he had been walking too fast to check suddenly, and he fell to his full length upon the ground. For a brief moment he lay there stunned. Then, overcome once more by the need for haste, he got up, brushed the dirt from his coat, and started on toward the shimmering waters again. How deceptive the distance was! Another 15 minutes brought Tommy to the water's edge. There he looked for the house in vain. Only trees stretched in all directions as far as he could see. Ought he retrace his steps to the orchard? Surely somewhere near it he would be able to find a house. The orchard at least was a sign of civilization. Strange he had not thought of that at the time he was there. But Tommy made up his mind he would not go back. That would be to lose precious time. By now Basil Kensington would have the sheriff on the case. With the principal's determination to let nothing happen that would bring the school into the news in an unfavorable light, he would spare nothing to have the boy found and returned. Tommy knew that if he succeeded in getting out of the state, it would be necessary for Kensington to get the G-men on the case, and then it would be impossible to keep the affair out of the paper. And what would his father do? With his fiery temper, would he not denounce both Kensington and the school for carelessness? Perhaps he would even take Tommy farther away from his mother. Once before he had suggested to the boy that he was forming plans to send him to Europe for his higher education. This might make him pack Tommy abroad now, even before he was ready for college. The pain in Tommy's temples brought his thoughts back to reality. Why had he this dreadful feeling? He had been hot and extremely tired before in his life, but he had never experienced symptoms like these. About half a mile down the beach, Tommy thought he saw something which looked like a pier built out into the water. Perhaps it would be best to go in that direction. It might lead to a house where he could get food. He had about decided that it would be better to run the risk of discovery on the chance of falling in with someone who would befriend him than to spend another night out in the open, especially now that he was feeling so sick. Dear St. Joseph, you have helped me so often before. Help me now. What shall I do? For a moment Tommy stood stark still, viewing the vast expanse apparently so devoid of human beings. The loneliness was bewildering to him, and his bodily misery was now so great that he doubted whether it would be possible for him to feel any worse. Painfully he continued his journey in the direction of the pier. His head throbbed with fever, his legs were almost too weak to move, his vision was getting more and more indistinct. He plodded on, but now it seemed mere automatic motion. He had lost all interest in finding a house. The desire for companionship dropped from him. He might have been walking in his sleep. Then the climax came. Tommy could go no farther. No matter how much he feared to stop, no matter even if he were found by the sheriff and taken back to the school jail, he simply could not go on. He would have to find a shady spot somewhere where he could lie down to rest. Perhaps this weakness would pass off. A suitable spot presented itself, and Tommy slumped down almost in a coma. The sun was now wheeling rapidly toward the west. It would soon go down behind the trees, which lined the lake on the other side, and then would come the cool breeze of the evening for which his burning fever made him long. End of chapter 8.